More than I am.
I forgot to.
All right. Good afternoon, commissioners. Welcome back, and over to you, Vice Chair Fry.
Good afternoon. Well, gavel is in. Chair Harrington should be in moments. Yeah.
You can't saunter in fabulous blue. Come on now.
Well, let me prove you wrong.
Will not be the first time today. I have been proven wrong. Oh, dear. In the very best ways.
Right ahead.
We're ready?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Well, thank you so much, Board Chair, for having us today. We are here to talk to you about our body worn camera and taser program. I forgot that I am in control.
Yes.
So I'm actually going to lead with what this whole thing is going to be about, which is the questions that I'm going to provide at the end. About as we're going through this, please write your questions, interrupt at will with your questions, whatever you need from us. We're ready to provide it. And at the end of this, of course, we intend to ask for your support in transitioning to a better, more efficient, more effective body worn camera system that combines our use of less lethal and taser. I think it's important to state that our mission is to protect the community's safety while maintaining transparency and accountability, and having body worn cameras on our deputies, on our corporals, on our sergeants allows us that additional level of transparency that we just didn't have before your board authorized the financing for us to be able to do this originally a few years ago. The body worn cameras and tasers are critical to our deputies' effectiveness in, I use the analogy of when you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so having the additional options of having taser and less lethal options means that our staff, in combination with de-escalation and other tactics, have the ability to provide service at a lower level of force when force is necessary. The last thing I want to say on that really is that, and Chief Deputy Roque and John Steyer will talk a bit about the budget. Chief Deputy Roque is really going to bring to light the specific safety concerns associated with our current body worn camera vendor. But we really need to look for a contract that is going to allow us to provide the quality level of service that our community not just expects from us, but should demand from us. Okay.
Thank you, Sheriff, and good afternoon, Commissioners and Chair and County Administrator Angie. Nice to be with you today. So I'm going to give you some background on where we're at, how we got here, and what our problems that we are experiencing are before we get into the budget and the ask part. Because it's important to understand the context. We're not just asking for new toys here. From a transparency and accountability perspective, obviously the cameras are the main vehicle that we have. Can you imagine a news story, a police incident that doesn't have a video associated with it in today's world? It's hard to really imagine. So it's either going to be somebody from the community recording a segment of the incident, and maybe not the entirety of the incident that preceded the use of force or the negative event, or it's going to be us recording the entire incident. And so we could have it not only for the public trust and accountability piece, but also later for the evidentiary piece for prosecution and accountability of the deputies if they did something wrong. And our staff actually really is happy to be wearing cameras and have them because it reinforces the good behavior more than anything. I've made a reference to the evidence collection side. The way cases are prosecuted in today's world, as opposed to when I used to do real police work, they actually start with the video playing in court for the jury or the bench trial for the judge. And then they go to testimony from the people. And so they literally rely on the video portions of it to do virtually all prosecution, is my understanding. So it's a critical component for that. And then officer safety. We do sometimes see people change their behavior once they're told they're being recorded on camera. So that does affect behavior, so that influences safety. It also, again, it holds each other as deputies accountable to our behavior and our interaction with people. There's a upper right on this slide, there's the numbers, so you have some quantifiable data, about 220,000 videos in a 2-year period we recorded over the last 2 years. And then a little breakdown of how many of those were actual just traffic stops and how many of those are criminal investigation. Those numbers don't add up to the total because there's other types of videos that are recorded in the interactions of deputies. Switching or kind of similar or keeping the officer safety vein as we transition the topic to tasers briefly. Obviously, the safety of our officers is primary. More options for tools and different ways to handle or control a situation is better because not every situation, to the sheriff's point, needs the hammer. In fact, most don't. So having this less than lethal option is an officer safety component for us. And I'll have a little more explanation on that. Both technologies, the camera and the taser, are integrated and they're reviewed for training, betterment, debriefing, lessons learned, evolution. There's case law that changes that applies. So all of this is helped with the use of these technologies. And then there's some legal protection. So we had a shooting, an officer-involved shooting last year with our tactical team. A gentleman pointed a firearm at the team and we returned fire. It was later revealed that that gentleman did not fire his weapon. And so the family had real questions once they learned about that over why their family member was shot. To the past sheriff and current sheriff's credit, they met with the family and showed them the video, the body-worn camera footage of the incident. And it explained to the family, and you could probably speak to this better than I can, why it happened in a way that they wouldn't have otherwise gotten. And there hasn't been a lawsuit filed yet. Maybe there won't be, maybe there will, I don't know, but it's certainly going to help us by having that video footage, and that's because of a body-worn camera. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
The only thing I'll say to expand on it is just that being there in the moment allowed us to connect with the family member and provide a measure of solace that they were able to see with their own eyes, which is different than us just explaining it and whether or not they believe us. And it was really beneficial, I think, for the family, even though it was very difficult. And we were able to really communicate how we cared for them in that. And that was pretty amazing.
So for numbers for tasers, is the bottom right graphic in that slide is the annual calls for service that we respond to as a Washington County Sheriff's Office is about 120,000 per year. Of those 120,000, just under 500 of those calls result in some form of use of force. Of that under 500, about half of those are simply we displayed a weapon but didn't actually use it. So pointed a firearm at somebody, pointed a taser at somebody, those kinds of things. We track that as a use of force. So that's included in that number. But when you back that out, you end up with half of that number. So out of the 240 actual uses of force-ish, in a year, we typically tase 25 times. So that's the frequency. Now, maybe not every single one of those, but certainly a majority of those 25 incidents, if we didn't have a taser, could have resulted in an officer-involved shooting. So that's what we're avoiding by having the alternatives. And nobody wants, sorry.
Can I ask you questions as we go along?
Yes, sir.
I've always wondered, is a taser considered a lethal weapon?
No, it's less than lethal.
What if somebody has a heart condition?
We actually train to avoid high-risk areas on the body, the head, the groin, the heart. So I'm not saying it's always perfect because it's dynamic,
Right.
but we train with specific target areas to try to avoid that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for the question.
It's I see that taser deployment 25, but how many is weapon deployment, or do you not track that?
We do track it. I don't have it in front of me that are just taser displayed. From memory, it's around 60 or 70 per year average. So I wanted to give you a timeline of the body worn camera program specifically, because there was extensive amount of work to get to this solution that we have today. Even though we're telling you that it's not working for us anymore. Commissioner Faiz is happy about that, that I'm saying that. But there was extensive trial and evaluation before. So in 2016, this program kind of launched with former Sheriff Garrett, where we started making inquiries and engagements with various solutions and options and vendors. We actually went out to RFP in 2017 after we secured a grant to help fund the program. And there were 10 vendors, as I recall, that initially responded to the RFP. It got whittled down to 3 possible solutions or vendors for this RFP, and we entered into a field evaluation with those 3 vendors that lasted, I think, 30 days. The result of that process was a contract awarded to our current provider, which is Utility Incorporated. Well, we started with only a deployment of 30 body-worn cameras to pilot the system. We didn't have policies developed. We had procedures that had to get developed. There's evidence fulfillment that requires staffing. So we had some shift in workload that had to happen and a bunch of training. So 2018 was a deployment of the pilot program. That took a while to get flushed out, probably longer than I would have liked, being the program manager at the time. So I apologize for that. But in 2020, we came back to the board and the board approved contract to be funded for a 5-year term. And so we're in year 4 of that 5-year contract right now. Year 4 ends at the end of this calendar year.
So I'd just like to clarify, given your earlier remark, we're not in a situation where we're questioning or changing our mind in terms of deploying body worn cameras across the force, rather moving forward with your recommendation to deploy to the vendor that you have the most confidence in, given this history and your current recommendations, correct?
That's exactly right, Chair.
Thank you.
Yep. Any questions on the timeline? Okay, so switching to the state of tasers, we currently have 3 different models of tasers that we have in our inventory. The Taser 7, the X26P, and the X26. This Taser 7 isn't the current version of Taser that's available. Taser 10 is the current one. So this is actually 1 generation old from that. If you look at the graph on the right, the table on the right, sorry, start with the column that has 7 at the top. That's the Taser 7. Taser 7, just for a vintaged, is 2018 is when they were first introduced. We have 29 of them in our inventory. And by Taser's numbers, they have a 75% successful deployment rate. In other words, when we fire the Taser off to use it in an application of force, it's successful 75% of the time.
Would you define successful?
So the Taser fires probes and they have to make contact and close an electrical circuit in order for it to
Activate.
well, and for the effect to happen on the subject. So if the probes don't land,
Oh,
like one misses or very thick clothing or the subject, you're too close a distance since you don't get the electromuscular interruption.
I wasn't sure if you meant success like compliance or success in that.
Sorry.
It was the operation of the taser.
Yeah, it's
Thank
the
you.
compliance part. So if we look at the middle column, the X26P, the vintage on that model is 2013, so 11 years old. Again, this is an electronic device, right? We have 223 of these types of tasers. Tasers numbers are 50% effective when deployed, so a lot less. And again, the average life across all of these, according to Taser now, is 5 years. So that's what they say you should get for a lifespan. And then the last column is the X26. That's the oldest version of Taser we have. They were first manufactured in 2003, so 21 years old. We have 242 of those that we are in service. So that is the majority of our Taser inventory is the oldest one. Taser didn't even track the successful deployment rate on that vintage. The other thing is the only one in that chart, in other words, in our inventory that's actually supported by the vendor is the Taser 7. The other two models do not have support any.
So the recommendation you're moving forward with, is it with, could you please clarify what model you're suggesting you move forward with?
Yes, Chair, the 7.
Okay.
We want to
The 10
standardize
is
the
the
7.
latest?
Yes, there's some other nuances about the 10 that we're not ready to commit to yet.
Okay, but will that put us in a weird situation of only having a 25% non-success rate? I don't know what the 10 success rate would be, but also, I don't know what you say there's limited stock. And with an average lifespan, you're now saying it's recommended, or I'm now learning it's 5 years, even though it looks like organizationally you've been operating 20. So I guess I'm really going to wonder what is the recommended lifespan, and will that 7 perform within your recommended lifespan within that period? That's what isn't clear to me.
I
And
understand.
I don't want to make the decision. I think it needs to be based upon your real world experience, but I don't yet understand what the organization would be buying.
Right. So the Taser 7 is the recommendation. This would be a 5-year contract, so it would be within that lifespan that they recommend. It's very common to see longer than 5 years, but 21 years is too long for sure.
But that's a choice that the department's made, because this is the first time in the 6 years that I've been in this seat that the issue's been brought forward.
It comes down, so if we use the analogy of vehicles, you build in a replacement cost into the vehicles so that when they age out. This program has never had that replacement cost structure. So that's what we're
So
trying to
you're,
implement.
so managerially, we're looking at having better equipment, of renewal and replacement and tracking and all that.
Exactly.
Yes.
Music to my ear.
Yeah, let me kind of bridge that with language that we've used with the board. This is about life cycle costing.
Yep.
And looking at this contract so that we also in the future help prevent kind of blips in the budget and forecast the best to our ability moving forward, and recognizing that this equipment is very similar to just the sheriff's office uniforms, their protective gear, the vehicle. So really looking at what does it take to outfit an individual to effectively deploy the duties that they're charged with deploying.
Am I correct in understanding that there are 494 total tasers within the inventory? Because that's what the cumulative number of.
That's correct.
So are you gonna put out a purchase of like 500 of them all at once, or?
Yeah, we'll get into the costing structure here in a
Okay.
few slides.
I'll wait.
There's some
No
cost
problem at all.
deferring going on.
Okay, thank you.
But that is an option if you chose that.
Nope, I'm following with you. I'm on the journey.
The one thing that's also besides well, let me cycle back to a reference you made about effectiveness. No tool is 100% effective. That doesn't exist, right? So.
But is 75 pretty good for a taser?
It is.
Okay.
In fact, you could have studies on firearms reliability for deployment, and you probably don't see anywhere near 75% success rates on firearms. It's just the nature of dynamic interactions.
Okay.
The other thing is the Taser 7 has a capability that is very useful from an officer safety perspective and a de-escalation perspective. We call it a warning arc. So just like displaying a weapon and before having to use it, it can have a desired effect with avoiding the force. Sometimes that's not enough, and actually actuating the taser is beneficial to show the subject that this is a real thing that is going to hurt if you don't comply. To do that with the other models, the X26P or the X26, you'd have to remove the cartridge from the end of it, activate the taser, run through the arc, 5 seconds, make sure it's over, and then put the cartridge back on. If you put the cartridge back on before the cycle ends, it launches the probes and you just deployed your weapon before you wanted to. If your hand is there, it's a bad day for your hand. It's fish hooks that go through your hand. Not to mention it's dynamic, right? And so if something changes in behavior of that subject in that time, you have to react very quickly. The Taser 7, you don't have to actually remove a cartridge to do that warning arc. It has the capability of just doing it without. So that's a nice de-escalation feature.
I still don't want a taser to be used on me, arc or otherwise.
Okay, we could have you watch another person get tased.
Yeah, there you go.
All right.
Stick with that.
You've mentioned Taser 7 and Taser 10. Is there an 8 and a 9?
No, the next jump is 10. I don't know why. Don't ask me.
Huh? Okay.
Somebody back here might know, but the 10 actually is classified as a firearm right now because of the actuation. Uses the same mechanism as the primer cartridge. So that's one of the issues with Taser 10 right now. That means we wouldn't be able to take it into the jail or use it in the jail. So there's things that are happening that are related to why we're going 7 instead of 10. Okay. While
Body worn cameras.
we're going back to body worn cameras. So now we're going to talk about the problems we have. And I'm going to pass around some props. So the larger unit, to Commissioner Willie's right, your right, is the utility system that we have now, and the smaller unit is the Axon system. So we'll start with hardware challenges, the battery life. So I think we're all accustomed to technology improving to the point where battery life is extending in virtually all our devices and vehicles and whatever else, right? For some reason, this technology has gone the wrong way. So we run 10-hour shifts on both patrol and jail, and we are seeing 8-hour battery life. So we don't even get a full shift out of battery. Initially, we were seeing 12 and 13 hours. So this has changed over time as their hardware upgrades have happened. Vibration feedback. So as the wearer, you want to know that your camera is still actively recording once you start it.
This is what they wear.
That is what they wear, yes. So that it's two pieces, right? Because one of them is what we call a holster, or they call it a holster. That is actually mounted to the inside of your shirt or the outer load-bearing vests. Many of our staff wear that. So it sits inside. When the battery life issue happened, the solution from the vendor was to add that extra battery pack on the back. And the first round of that, you could see the unit doesn't even fit in their own holster. And so that took several months to correct and make
It's
operate.
demonstrated.
And then this one is
That's the Axon.
Axon.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that one
It just
has an
flips on.
internal, the back pulls off, it's magnets.
Oh,
It's actually takes some force, yeah. And then the magnets go on the inside of the shirt or the load bearing vest, but the camera sits on the
I feel
outside.
like I'm gonna break.
Oh, you're not
No,
gonna break
I'm
it.
not gonna
trust me. It's fairly ruggedized. So what's nice about that is you could see if it's recording or operating. Microphone is on the outside of your clothing so that you don't have talking through a layer, so you could hear. It's not so bad for the deputy speaking, wearing the camera, but becomes really problematic for the person they're talking to. The vibration feedback, because it's worn on the inside on the utility system, we have an external controller. It looks like an Apple Watch. That's Bluetooth, and that's how you turn it on, turn it off, mute, things like that. We've been having a lot of trouble with connectivity between those two devices, right? And so the connection would be broken, and then the only alternative is to unzip your shirt or your load-bearing vest, pull the unit out, and manually manipulate the device.
This is what my nephew wears.
So
That one?
Yep.
Yeah, that's the most common system in the US, probably worldwide. The health concerns. So we've had some staff report some concerns of effects from wearing the utility camera that we've had to accommodate in various ways. Things like irregular heartbeats and breast lumps. So obviously that's a concern. That's the primary concern, is the safety of our staff. We've made accommodations, but we don't know of any other system that has ever had those kinds of reports. And then crashes. They sent us a series of operating system updates like most devices get. And when they were installed, the whole camera totally failed and was not operational. It took about a week to resolve that. And so we had probably more than half our camera inventory that was non-operational for about a week.
And from the area cities with Exxon version, they haven't had software update problems that you know of.
Correct. None that I'm aware of.
Awesome, thank you.
There's some service problems, the battery swelling. So we had, before the battery packs that were added in 2022, we had a series of units that experienced battery swelling. And so when that happens, the unit can explode. That's the concern, right? And you're wearing it on your chest. That's not great. And also, there's gases in here or fluids that could be released, right? So that's a big problem. We have to take them immediately out of service. It took them 6 months to send us for that. And then, of course, the, enhanced battery pack. I think Commissioner Five's comment was valid about the size of the unit. Software
And it
problems.
heats up too, right? Like
Correct.
That's one,
Yes.
that one has a more just.
And this does get some heat to it, but it's on the outside, so you don't feel it.
Is there any feedback around the magnets coming off?
They will come off with enough force.
If we're-
So there are times when that happens, yes. But the other thing that we've experienced with the utility system, the unit itself has a lens, like it's a camera, it's a Motorola phone, basically. And so it has to align perfectly with the lens on the holster. And it has shifted with regularity inside its own holster to the point where the lens is blocked, and it's kind of like pulling a dark shade over your camera. And so you record your whole incident, you sit down to write your report, and all you have is audio, some audio, and no video. Because
Ask you another question.
Yes, sir.
I agree with you. We're all there on the body cameras, just the cost and how we afford it and all that sort of thing. But my question is, I've always been curious why the cameras are only forward-looking and why a system wasn't developed that you have a rear camera, much like you do in a car, because in a dynamic situation, not everybody's standing right in front of you. There's things that are happening all around. Technology is there, but doesn't anyone have the product? Or it wouldn't have to be another full battery packed camera. It would just be a camera that would feed into the one that you're recording on. But is the technology, is this all old technology? Are we going to see, or they're going to see in about 2 or 3 years? Or do we need to replace it? Because that's really old stuff now, because nobody's using it anymore.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. I don't know that I have all the expertise to answer. I haven't seen any system that has multiple facing cameras on the same unit but Axon has, I want to say 28 or 32 different mounting options, a helmet, a visor, a bill of a baseball cap style, up on the shoulder, the epaulets, what we call them. So there's different options for mounting the camera that attaches to the lens that Axon has, whereas utility does not. So like a motorcycle officer, for example, wears a helmet. So that's a really easy place to mount a camera that gives you the eye view.
If this was a car and you were buying it, would this be the middle level model, the higher level model, the bottom? I mean, we don't have the expertise to know whether
Sure.
you're buying the cheapest product that you find, the most expensive, or
The Axon system, I would say, is the industry standard.
is what?
The industry standard. They have by a long shot, the largest market share, the most R&D. Part of what you'll see in the budget slides that are coming up are built-in replacement of the hardware to upgrade to newer technology. Yeah, this is the standard.
It's actually the highest level. If we were comparing it to
Not-
a car, it's your
Or-
most
yeah.
current,
So we're not buying a phone that's several iterations back. And
right?
No, this is the latest generation.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and with built-in life cycle replacement.
To Commissioner Rogers' question around the cameras and the version of zoomed out, is this camera recording connected to the roll cars recording, or is it Like, is there a different procedure that says this starts and this starts at different time, or are they
Synchronized.
coordinated? Yeah.
So their system has the ability to do that. It costs more than what we're asking for right now. For a couple of reasons. One, we recognize that we're out of budget cycle with this ask. And it's not the best time to ask for more money. So we acknowledge that. The other part is I could deploy what's going to be end up being close to 200 cameras for my staff in a short period of time and train them. The camera installs in a vehicle requires coordination with fleet and upfitting and things like that. So it would be a deferred deployment. To answer your question, yes, the system is integrated with a camera, in-car camera system that is all activated and time synchronized and GPS synchronized on all at the same. We're not asking for that today because that would be additional funding that we would need to do that. But that's certainly an option down the road.
It has the capability, doesn't it?
Yes.
Do that.
It's the goal.
Yeah, because that will give you what Commissioner Rogers is asking, like
Sure.
have the direct interface and then everything else. Okay.
Yeah, and in addition to that, it would also give you a camera that's recording the prisoner compartment of the vehicle, and all kinds of interesting things happen back there, to include evidence, stashing. So there's a lot of advantages. We want to do that someday, but we're trying to crawl, walk, run with this project.
I've got about 15 more minutes.
Thank you. Last thing on this slide is the impact for the district attorney's office. So they have 2.5 FTEs that are dedicated to Washington County Sheriff's Office evidence, video evidence. They tell us that's disproportionate with how much FTE and work there is with other agencies. Every other agency in Washington County, to include the district attorney's office, uses the Axon cloud system for digital evidence. And we do not, and that causes a lot of problems. And you could see the quote there from a member of one of the leads of the digital evidence team. Okay. So we talked a little bit about the vendor and the market share and all that, so I don't want to go through that. The one thing I'll highlight from here, and Ms. Angie highlighted the life cycle costing strategy for me. I appreciate that. The one thing I want to highlight here is you're going to see numbers that are higher than our existing solution, but that's also because there's more capabilities in this system, some of which we talked about. The one we didn't mention yet is the artificial intelligence report writing feature. So it transcribes video into a police report or a transcription of an interview for an investigation. And it has some checks and balances built in for the human to interact and check it and make sure it's correct. But what we found in the side-by-side comparison of manual report writing versus AI is their report's better than ours, frankly. It's more thorough, more detailed, more consistent, and took a fraction of the time. So we're going to save a lot of time in report writing, which is going to allow deputies to service more calls. That's really important in an environment with staffing shortages. All right, I'm going to pass it over to John Steyer.
Good afternoon, board. For the record, I'm John Steyer. I'm the administrative manager of the Sheriff's Office. Just want to talk briefly about the budget considerations as we look at this project. So Axon does have cooperative pricing agreements in place, and we've reviewed those with the procurement division that we can utilize this contract as a contract vehicle. And as we're talking with Axon, there are options to adjust the costs to make it more affordable in the near term or have flat cost across the term of the agreement. And I'll talk about those in the next two slides. Or a longer term agreement could also provide some discounting as an option. I don't know if you recall, when we did utility, we invested a chunk up front and we had lower payments throughout the life of the contract. We look at transition costs. So there's data storage requirements with our current vendors that will have to transition from their servers over to ours. And there'll be a point in time where we need to work through that process with them once we determine how we're going to close out that contract. And then, of course, there's also outfitting and some training costs. And then a phased transition, so that overlap will have some costs with utility and some costs with the new contract as we're phasing in and out. Those details will have to be worked out as we move forward and get approval to execute.
Before you get into the next two slides on budgeting, It isn't clear to me the number, the unit counts. Could you clarify that for
Right,
me?
so the unit counts, I think right now we have around 200 body worn cameras in the plan and 375 tasers is what's in the current estimates. And these are
Not
rough
the
order of magnitude
494?
estimates,
No, and one of the reasons for that is we have to have excess for parts because you can't buy parts, replacement parts. So we're carrying more older tasers in inventory than we actually need for the.
But as of today, you think you only need 375?
That's for the certified staff count, yes.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you for the question. Just to talk through some of the costs. So this chart just oriented the chart. So we have several funding sources we utilize to support our programs. The top line there is our general fund, and we have estimated cost of a flat rate contract if we divided the cost evenly across the fiscal years. Beginning in January, so a half a year in January, half a year starting in January, and then beginning in July with a full year cost going forward. And then our current budget, so we're budgeted for body worn cameras, and also we have some dollars for tasers. And so there you can see the difference in the general fund cost of what we're currently paying versus the new contract, which is about going out to the FY 26, 229,000 additional dollars we would need to support that across the contract life.
You're saying the current contract for both body worn cameras and tasers is which line?
So for our general fund amount that we have budgeted, so for example, $98,000 represents the amount in the general fund
Well, that's budgeted.
that we have budgeted, correct?
Okay, that's not necessarily, you're saying that budgeted covers the current contract that's supposed to end in December.
Yes, and we're considering those costs, right?
Now I follow you.
Sorry. And then the next lines down, we have the special funds. So we have money in the district patrol, which is the SPD, our contracted services, and also the public safety local option levy. So those are grouped together. And I can break those out as needed. But those costs are the majority of the cost of the contract, and the bolded red line number is the estimated cost for the contract across the life of the 5 years. And then the bottom total, like the amount we would need to support this option.
What's the finance cost that's embedded in there?
So there's no finance cost that I'm aware of in the quote. So it's kind of buried in those numbers.
Yeah, there's finance costs.
I know there is. But I'll show you, if I could just go to the next slide. So we're also looking at an option where we would pay less upfront and more in the back years. The rough order magnitude quotes that we received didn't have any increase in those costs. So that's something I think we're going to need to look at as we.
So would you be prepared to give this board a cost of a buyout if they just said X number of dollars buyout so that we can compare those?
Well, it's a service. We're contracting a service, right? So it's not, we're not.
You're buying equipment too, though.
Right,
Bundled cost.
right. But you also have the service, you have the storage cost and all of that as well. So it's not, we're buying everything directly. So.
Financing costs are usually embedded at about 20-some percent. They're
Right.
Pretty expensive.
Right. I mean, this is contract prices according to the cooperative agreement. And so I imagine they have some cost built in that gives them flexibility to provide options for people.
Can you use this equipment on other services if you find that the service is not acceptable? Let's say they went bankrupt tomorrow. I'm not saying they would, but can that equipment be used on other service?
Yeah, that's a great question. I tend to think a lot of these companies are proprietary and they kind of only talk to their own systems. That's something I can certainly look into.
Can I ask a clarifying question? And I'm just looking at flat. So the documentation says that this calendar year, that the end of the contract for the current body worn cameras is December 2025.
Correct.
And you're asking us to fund,
in
we're
January.
contractually bound.
Right, we're talking about ending the contract early. Yes.
We have an exit clause in the current contract that we feel we've met, and we've
Okay.
conferred with county council on that.
Okay, so that part I'm clear on. But in the budget considerations, you say a change in vendors during the current budget. No, you said the sheriff's office did anticipate that costs would increase next year at the end of the contract term in December 2025. But I don't see that, given that you've budgeted the same. So that seems a little incongruent. It's neither here nor there, though, so.
No, I see what
Gonna
you're saying.
ignore
The
that.
budgets for the
Yeah.
continuing years don't line. We don't, honestly, we don't know what they would
So the
be.
bottom line for me is, I understand that there are at least two different contract scenarios, but then there's a 5 and a 10-year. Either way, we need to give our CAO direction to come up with a funding scenario that would allow us or allow the organization to move from one equipment manufacturer to another in a way that we can afford.
That's exactly right, Chair.
Okay,
That's
so,
exactly what we're asking.
so that's however it goes, flat or phased, isn't up to us today. Cause we gotta figure out how to get the right equipment into the hands of the employees, right? Okay. So commissioners, do you have any questions around?
Can I just provide one bit of clarification?
Yep.
It is not practice that, number one, we would bring you a contract such as this out of the contract cycle. So I want to flag that. You've heard the issues with the current contract. So that's why now. The other thing, other aspect is from a budget practice, it is not good budget practice to come forward to your board with a budget request out of the budget cycle. So I want to flag those two are out of the normal business process that we've really worked to establish. And so that's the why for why now. So this would be handled through a budget supplemental to address, and we would work through those funding scenarios between CAO, Sheriff's Office, and Finance, because we need to look at what are the this current year general fund impacts and what are future years. We also frankly have to be looking closely at what are the special funds and what does that what do these costs mean to our future projections and how that impacts service level. So there'll have to be kind of some back and forth working through these scenarios to get to the contract.
But I also have a practical consideration, given what you've described. Today's October 1st. They're looking for deploying or procuring, closing on a contract and procuring equipment as of January 1. 3 months from now. Is that realistic?
So we do feel it's realistic. That's why it's getting in front of you today is important. We have done the back work. So there's the cooperative agreement. So we're working off that template. So there's the good
There's a lot of
structure
legwork
there.
that's
Yeah,
been done.
there's a lot of legwork to come to this conversation.
Okay.
I want to go back to the reasons we're here. We are raising, we're addressing a contract that frankly is out of cycle 1 year in advance. And this is a budget consideration outside of our normal budget process that will impact future operating budgets. So that's the why the conversation, why now?
I had one more question. All services are now trying to go subscription based. This is a subscription based, but just like your phones, they're sitting there saying, gee, we'll somehow go over 5 years and then maybe we won't even service it. Maybe we're going to sell you something. Is that the model that you're going to so that you don't own the equipment? I like owning equipment because I can go to any vendor I want and do anything, but that's not the model anymore with these kinds of things.
I could,
You're gonna rent them in essence.
It's like
Are
your
your payments?
cable box.
Pardon me?
It's like your cable box.
It's exactly, you're gonna rent them and then all of a sudden you're gonna say, well, those are outdated. Now you gotta
Tied
go
to the
through.
service.
So this is a more than a 5-year deal. This is a perpetual, if you stay with any company, because at the industry that this board is gonna be looking at a perpetual million, 1, 2, 3 every year to update. And more with escalation. Is that the model?
Yes, however,
I wouldn't agree with perpetual. They're not making a perpetual
Yeah.
vendor decision.
No, I'm not saying variant, I'm saying this service.
yeah, it's a 5-year
Good with that.
contract. It's for service. The utility contract we're in now is that same structure. That's how all body worn camera systems
Okay.
work.
Just
We
curious.
do own the Taser equipment that we have. We do own the current inventory of utility cameras.
Okay.
With Axon, we would own these cameras, but they would replace them. Quite frankly, these don't have value to them as the subscription model does. So that it's built into the contract to replace these. I think it's 3 years or 30 months.
3 years,
like
it was
that.
3 years.
So no vendors are really selling. That's why, I mean, if you buy the table, we could see this here 20 years from now. They don't,
Right.
after 5 years, take it away and say, you want to continue.
Right.
But in this model, that's what it's going to be doing. The board needs to be prepared.
Bound by contractual limits, yes.
All right, I get it.
Clarifying question. If on slide 6, it says 5 years, why are you saying 3 years?
Well, the refresh for the cameras is at 3-year
Yeah.
point.
Thank you.
And, yeah, right.
So it's, they call it, technology. It's
Recommended
basically tech
refresh.
support, yes.
Refresh.
Thank you. I follow you.
If there's time, I have about a 30-second video, but we don't need to see it. It just compares one video to the other if you want it.
No, we don't need to see it.
Okay, I have a question, 2 questions. First, is there any recourse against the failed equipment that we have currently?
Recourse in what sense? Sorry.
Money.
Monetary recourse?
Oh,
Legal will take that.
I'll follow up with legal counsel and general counsel for sheriff's office and we'll make sure you get those answers.
Okay, thank you. I just bringing that up.
question.
And then the other question I have is based on our cycle for the public, I'm reflecting back on what portion of this is paid for by the ESPD and by public safety levies. So what, is there any tie to the pay less upfront or on the backside in relationship to the public safety levy? Any comment there?
It just does provide us 2 extra years to plan for a larger amount later. So it gives us till FY 27.
They have to look in.
We have to look at the
Right.
scenarios.
All right,
I
thank
agree.
you. I'm just trying to get my head around all this. Thank you.
So the question is, do we want to give direction to the county administrator to move forward on developing a financial recommendation for transitioning the sheriff's office body worn contract and Taser vendors? When do you anticipate having that?
We will be working on this as quickly as possible. It's not programmed yet into the rolling agenda, but we will get this on the board's calendar.
But that'll come to us as part of a budget supplemental that you
Yeah.
refer to.
Yeah.
Okay, great. We'll see it in the rolling agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you, board.
Okay, next, we're going to move to board and leadership communication. Who would like to go first?
You go first. And my report's long, but what I'd like to do is just report back on what happened at the impact meeting. And if we have time, I'll come back and give my whole report. But I think it's important that I talk to you about the impact meeting, which was last Wednesday night. Impact did recommend the acceptance of the COO's recommendation on the UGR with 3 amendments. There were 4 amendments proposed and the 4th one failed. Those amendments include, the first one was moving from the baseline, they want Metro to adopt the high forecast model instead of the baseline approach as outlined in the COO staff report. The second amendment passed specified that Metro would agree, and this is a bit long, so I'm going to read this. would agree to create and host a task force highlighting opportunities for creating growth and capacity models that are more reflective of market realities. Senior staff will participate in a task force ending no later than mid-2025 with report back to the Metro Council. The goal would be to work with local jurisdictions and private sector partners to address the employment lands challenges identified through the UGR process, including but not limited to the slope and lot size. So that was an important amendment. And the final one was that the Metro shall not impose any additional requirements on the city of Sherwood that were not articulated in the Sherwood West concept plan. Now, I wanted to bring this up to you because the meeting was referred to as epic. It was also referred to as legendary. It took an additional half hour to get through all pieces of this. I think that it was a little difficult to keep people on task. And we had one person, we had just barely met quorum, and we had one person that was losing connectivity on their audio device. So that was a little difficult, but we did get through it. And the next day, I made a report to the Metro Council about all aspects of the Fourth Amendment that did not pass was put forward by the city of Portland. Carmen Rubio put forward an amendment that, let's see if I can remember, it increased the density to, I believe it was 12 per acre, and it was about 4,000 total. Is that right,
I
Stephen?
thought it was 20.
They started at 20, but they came down.
Okay. All right.
But it did not pass.
I was just curious what.
In fact, it almost died for lack of a second, but there was a late second. Now it came forward.
City of Portland does that every UGR site.
Yes, they do. So, and that was after, I just have to say this, that was after not attending any of the meetings in advance of the recommendations. But anyway, just a little irritation on my part. So I think what I just want you to know is that there was a lot of discussion, but there was also all of these amendments passed by a fairly wide margin. So I want you to know that as well. I will defer the rest. I've got other things to talk about, but I know that we're going to be running late today. So,
Well, I would highlight though that for the MPAC meeting of September 25th, that they highlighted two things. For the regional housing funding, they'll have another work session that will be on Thursday. So I'll ask Grace to listen to that one while the rest of us are in the roundtable. In addition, in the UGR presentation, they had a slide about renewing the regional vision. And it's the first time I've seen any slide about they're moving forward with their new effort, that they have a committee going forward. So I certainly hope they'll be explaining themselves a little bit more broadly than just to MPAC, so that the word gets out on the street. They're already soliciting applications for that committee.
okay. Thank you. There was also a quick report at the very end on RWAC, but that is going to be, the majority of that report is being deferred to the next.
Oh, great.
So that's my quick update on a really big chunk of work that took all year to accomplish in MPAC, and now is at the council, and the council frankly is going to face a lot of pushback. So we'll see how it goes as we move forward through the process.
Next.
Okay, I'll do it. This is it's interesting. It's kind of 2 weeks worth because I forgot that we had to go back that far. We went on a cat tour. And that was a great snapshot of where we are and how much that building has changed. And then next time we go out, it'll change even more. On on the 19th, which is a Thursday, I attended as the West Side Economic Alliance trip that was also NAIOP sponsored. It was a trip around, they had about 120 people from the Portland area on 3 different buses, and we trekked around Hillsborough showing development and what's going on in a variety of places there. I won't go into too much detail, but there's a lot of development going on primarily north of Evergreen, all the way up and down from Jackson School Road. We toured where the governor's proposed 373 or 6 acres or whatever that is going to be, and what that's going to potentially look like as well. So that was a great afternoon. There was a lot of interest in that. That was very well done. On the 20th, there was at the public safety meeting, PSCC, the chair and I presented some of the key priorities of the board. That was at the request of the PSCC. Wanted to know what some of our board priorities are and how they could anticipate going into the future, how they could support and help. So we went into a number of those items, headed off to Pittsburgh to see Queen Tanya, now
President,
President.
Madam
That's
President.
right. Well, I don't know which is higher.
Madam President.
Anyway, that was very good. It's very cool. It was good to see what it is that you are so invested in, and to get a little bit of a snapshot of what that's all about. So that was very good. And then